Gökberk Demirci had always believed that a person's life was made of choices, some grand, some small, and some powerful enough to become permanent. His tattoo fell into the last category. It wasn't his first rebellious act, nor was it the result of a reckless night, as people like to imagine. Instead, it was a deliberate stroke of identity, carved not on impulse but on understanding. To him, ink was a language, silent, but louder than words when placed on the skin. And his tattoo, though simple to an outsider, carried an entire world inside it. He remembered the day he first thought about getting it. It was years before he actually stepped into the studio. At that time, he was just a young man with a heavy mind and a restless heart, still figuring out how much of himself he was allowed to show to the world. Fame had not yet arrived, scripts had not yet crossed his hands, and cameras had not yet learned to follow him. Back then, life was quieter, but his inner world was anything but. Growing up, Gökberk had always been the kind of person who stored emotions like chapters in a book. He didn't display them easily. He didn't scatter them recklessly. Each feeling, each memory, each loss, even each triumph, was tucked into an inner shelf where he could revisit it later. His tattoo idea came from one such chapter. It was a moment of pain, as many assumed, but a moment of clarity, a realization that he wanted something on his body that represented both what he had lived and what he hoped to become. So when people asked him, why a tattoo, he didn't answer with cliches. Instead, he spoke in metaphors about journeys, symbols, and the quiet strength a person finds when they decide to carry something permanently. For him, a tattoo wasn't decoration. It was a reminder, a compass, a truth. He believed tattoos were like windows, small openings to the deeper expressions of a person. And though he was a public figure, he never believed the world was entitled to decipher everything about him. That was the beauty of ink. People could try to interpret it, but only he knew what it meant. The day he finally walked into the tattoo studio was vivid in his memory. He recalled the smell first, a mix of sterilized metal, fresh paint, and something nostalgic that reminded him of old notebooks. The artist had looked at him with recognition, but not awe, which he appreciated. He never liked being treated differently. "You sure?" the artist asked, as all artists do, and he nodded without hesitation. He had spent years thinking about it. After all, it wasn't the symbol that mattered most, but the intention behind it. What would remind him every time he looked at it? It represented resilience, growth, a promise he had made to himself. To stay true to who he was, even when the world tried to mold him into something else. Pain didn't bother him. In fact, he welcomed it. Pain, in his view, was proof that something meaningful was happening. As the needle pressed into his skin, he felt a strange calmness. It wasn't the adrenaline people talked about. It wasn't excitement either. It was peace, a sense of aligning something internal with something external. He later described the experience in an interview, not the meaning of the tattoo, but the sensation. "It felt like writing something with my body," he said, "like carving a sentence that only I can fully read." Fans analyzed that line for weeks, creating theories, designing fan edits, and turning his words into quotes that circulated across social media. Some believed the tattoo honored someone from his past. Others believed it represented a philosophy he lived by, and while he appreciated their creativity, he smiled privately, knowing the truth was something quieter, more personal. He didn't mind the curiosity. He understood that being in the public, I meant constant speculation. People loved stories, and he was a storyteller by profession. So he couldn't blame them for wanting to decode his own story. But he made a silent rule for himself. Some parts of him would remain his alone. His tattoo belonged to that rule. Still, he held a beautiful openness about the idea of tattoos in general. In conversations with friends or colleagues, he often spoke about ink as an extension of experience. "A tattoo is not meant to be explained," he once said while discussing the idea with a co-star. "It's meant to be felt." That was the core of his view. Tattoos were emotional, not logical. They didn't need justification. To him, the meaning of a tattoo could evolve over time. The symbol might stay the same, but the person carrying it grows, and so its meaning shifts with them. This fluidity fascinated him. It was the opposite of the rigid expectations people often placed on him as an actor. Everyone wanted him to fit into a certain role: the romantic lead, the warrior, the gentle hero. But his tattoo reminded him of the freedom to define himself on his own terms. When he looked at it in the mirror, he never saw a trend. He never saw a rebellious statement. He saw a promise to stay grounded, a promise to stay brave, a promise to stay connected to the roots that shaped him. What he valued most about the tattoo was how it helped him stay authentic in a world that was constantly trying to shape him. Fame was tricky. People loved to create versions of you that you didn't recognize. They constructed identities, expectations, and narratives that didn't always match who you were behind closed doors. But the tattoo whispered, in its silent and unchanging way, "Remember who you are." He often reflected on the reactions people had toward tattoos. Some admired them, some judged them, some romanticized them, some feared them. But all these reactions fascinated him because they revealed more about the person reacting than the person with the tattoo. He believed tattoos exposed perceptions, how people viewed art, permanence, identity, and even freedom. For Gökberk, judgment never mattered. What mattered was authenticity. If something expressed who you were, then there was no shame in carrying it proudly on your skin. This philosophy was something he frequently expressed to younger fans who messaged him about wanting tattoos, but fearing criticism. He always encouraged them to think deeply about permanence, not because he wanted to discourage them, but because he respected the meaning behind commitment. Do it for yourself, he would say, not for approval, not for fashion, not for anyone else's excitement. That was his golden rule. Any tattoo must come from a place of personal truth. He acknowledged that tattoos were not for everyone, and that was perfectly fine. He never believed that having a tattoo made someone more expressive or more spiritual. It was simply one way, one path of holding a story. Some people wrote theirs in journals. Some carried them in memories. Some shared them in music. He happened to carry one on his skin. Years after getting the tattoo, he still felt connected to it. If anything, the connection had grown deeper. It followed him into new roles, new cities, new experiences. It was there when he rose to fame, when he faced challenges, and when he found moments of joy. It had aged with him, quietly, gracefully, and with purpose. And perhaps that was his favorite part of it. Not the design, not the symbolism, but the companionship. The tattoo accompanied him like a silent witness to his journey. It reminded him that life was not just about moving forward, but also about honoring the steps that brought him there.